Emily Schrader is journalist and Middle East expert. Always good to gauge your views on this one, Emily. It was looking quite good yesterday when Donald Trump sort of talked about this. I thought, wow, they've agreed to it. Hamas down their arms, everything's tickety-boo. Finally, the final piece or pieces of the jigsaw puzzle. What's your assessment, then, of where we are so far? Because that's how it was meant to look. Hamas are telling a slightly different story.
Well, you know, it's not surprising. It's something that we've seen from the beginning. You know, when Donald Trump put out his, I think it was 23 initially point plan to start, Hamas rejected it in full. They never reneged on that. They never went back and said, yes, we will actually disarm. So this is really something that Israel kind of expected from day one. In fact, when I was reading the most recent assessments from the prime minister's office, they stated explicitly that the prime minister wouldn't even bother coming out against the statements that we heard in the past 24 hours because everyone here from right to left fully expects Hamas to renege on whatever it is that they initially claim. And that's already happened. Unfortunately, within the first 24 hours, we saw at first, okay, we're willing to disarm at least certain things. And then already they're saying, no, we won't. We will only certain things. But when Israel does XYZ first. So this is what we've been going through for many, many years with Hamas. It's not surprising. And it's one of the reasons why I hold the position until today that the real game changer isn't going to happen until you see a different regime in Tehran. And that's who's sponsoring Hamas, Hezbollah, all these proxy groups.
100%. And that's kind of what we thought was happening, a new regime in Iran. Mr. Trump talked about getting rid of the bad guys, and then some new people came in that looked remarkably like the old people. Some, I think, related. Some actually still the same, quite literally. Mr. Trump then said, oh, look, we've got some new guys. These are much better. And then a couple of weeks later said, no, they're not much better at all. I know this is very Trumpy in the way he does things, and I get that, but all things come from Tehran, right? I mean, that's ultimately going to be the kind of starting pistol, as it were, for peace.
Well, I think the unfortunate reality is that before we can get to peace, and I mean regional peace, because that's what I believe there will be the day after the Islamic Republic, we do have to deal with the Islamic Republic. And I think the longer that we kick the can down the road by trying to have sort of, bandage deals, we patch up one thing only to have 20 more holes open up as a result of that. And that's not a long-term policy that's helpful really to anyone. And at some point, some leader is going to have to bite the bullet and establish some sort of international unity or international coalition that can hold this regime accountable. And that might look primarily economic. It might not look like a military campaign. There are many ways to apply pressure to the Islamic Republic, and that needs to be done not just by the United States, but by everyone involved, because that's really the only way that we're going to see an end to all of these problems. It's not just the nuclear issue. It's not just the ballistic missiles. It's the human rights violations. It's the economic situation. It's all of these factors, and we have to address them before we can expect to see an actual meaningful change in the region.
Trouble is, Emily, and this is always the problem, of course, we are dealing with a medieval mentality, terrorism in a different league even to the conventions of most terrorist organisations. These people don't care. If they're blown up once in a while, they also don't care. They become martyrs and somebody else takes their place. So you can have somebody in the Oval Office, you can have Netanyahu and a change of regime in Israel, and to these guys, it matters not a jot because their theological imperative, their purpose in life supersedes all of this stuff. How do you battle with that kind of ideology? It's also, in translation, defined as madness by some people.
I agree completely that it's madness to us. To them, it seems perfectly logical. And they've been very transparent from 79 through today that this is the objective, not of Khamenei, not of Khomeini in 1979, but of the entire regime and the entire IRGC. It's not about Israel. It's not about England. It's not about America. It's about all of it. They want to export the revolution abroad. And that's exactly what their behavior has indicated. So how do you deal with that? As I mentioned, there are several ways. Of course, there is the military option. I think that needs to be applied in certain ways. Specifically targeting key leadership is going to be a major factor in this. But I don't believe you can bomb your way into regime change. I think it needs to come from the people. And a huge part of that is going to be a full implementation of the entire flight of sanctions that we have seen. We need to see the ongoing blockade of the Strait of Hormuz by the United States, as Donald Trump tried to put forward forward. This was crucial to the regime, absolutely crippled them. The problem is we keep stopping. And as the Iranians that I'm in touch with on the ground are saying to me, just don't stop. Keep applying pressure. If you're doing a military campaign, do the military campaign until the end. But the back and forth is really damaging. And in fact, it sends a very weak message to the regime that they continue to exploit. That's why we saw what they did with the attacks on Jordan, with the attacks on Kuwait, and with the attacks that we'll continue to see until there is a coherent and, most importantly, consistent policy from President Trump.
Emily, great stuff. Thank you very much indeed. Lovely to see you again. Emily Schrader, journalist and Middle East expert on the latest there. She's absolutely bang on. All roads lead out of Tehran. And until you've got that bit right, and you're not going to get that bit right, are you, with pretty much the same regime in charge as before?